Hey, folks. Welcome to week 12. I'll be your friendly neighborhood professor this week. You may have noticed that Dr. Hecht has been running the last few weeks, but we're moving back into philosophy territory right now. So we're going to be thinking about dignity and what makes life worth living. We're also going to be looking at disabled life this week. I would like you to take a look at the weather near you and note that there's going to be some fantastic weather this week. So I hope that you can get out and move around while assuring a safe distance from other people. The 6-foot minimum is really a minimum. You should strive for more than that. You may have heard also that the CDC is recommending wearing cloth face masks when you're out. There are lots of good tutorials for how to make no-sew face masks, but if you also enjoy a little bit of crafting now and then and have some old t-shirts and other thicker, denser fabrics lying around, you can make a multi-layered, well-fitting face mask. We're planning to allow it to fit to this area right here, the nasolabial area, by probably using some pipe cleaners, which are bendable and shapeable. Right. So take care of yourselves, take care of each other. If you are a member of an essential working group and you still have to work, especially if you're working in a medical setting, and I know some of you are, thank you for your labor. It's a risk the rest of us will try to mitigate by staying home since we can. All right. So what we're going to do right now in this lecture is that I will share my screen with you and we'll talk through this week's lecture notes. They're also available just as lecture notes. But I'm going to provide a little bit of context, some of which is on the screen, some of which is not, for both of our readings this week. The Pullman reading on dignity, and then Joe Stramondo's piece on the ideology of pity. Okay, so bear with me a second. Here we go. Share screen. Awesome. Okay. So right now, you should be about to see my PowerPoint. Let's see if we can make that work. Yeah. All right, and it's got a little screen for me right there. Sweet. Okay, so beauty isn't formally in any of, well, isn't formally taken as a key concept for the readings this week, but I think it's really woven in there, especially Pullman's piece on dignity and beauty as well. So I think that the one way to look at this week is really getting at some of the philosophical aspects of what gives life value. When is that value over? Who decides when that value is over? So take a minute as I go through the information on the next slide, try to figure out how this connects to the Pullman reading. And I'll put a little bit of an area in the discussion forum so we can talk about this. So the poet Rumi was a 13th century Persian poet, one of my favorite poets. And he was also a legal scholar and judge, an Islamic scholar, a theologian, not a theologian. So proofread your PowerPoints if you're ever giving a presentation, guys. But also a Sufi mystic. And he was from the area that's now Afghanistan and Turkey and was once part of the Ottoman Empire. So he was living in the 13th century, in the 1200s. And one of his more famous sayings is here as translated by Coleman Banks, developed from a further translation by Nicholson, where he says, "Don't turn your head. Keep looking at the bandaged place. That's where the light enters you. The wound is the place where the light enters you." Now, this is sometimes translated as the light radiates there and heals. There's a question as to whether or not Leonard Cohen's famous song Anthem was inspired by Rumi. So you could look up either the poem or Leonard Cohen's song Anthem. But he's got this really famous set of lines in Anthem. "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." And this is really a kind of beautiful idea, right? That it's somehow the damage that shows the beauty, that doesn't just reveal it, but is actually part of it, right? That is necessary for it, that is necessary to it. Rumi also wrote one of my favorite poems ever, "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leading. It doesn't matter. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come yet again, come." And here again, we have this notion that uh, a difference, a failure, a weakness, something different from the ideal, something less than the ideal doesn't make you unworthy, that you're still part of us, part of the human community. So keep that in mind as you're going through the Pullman reading, and try to think about how that relates to the Pullman reading. Try to think also about how that relates to issues of disability generally. So I'm going to set up Joe Stromando here a little bit. Not only is the piece that I assigned you guys to read an important and influential piece in disability studies, and not only is Stromando himself really rising to prominence now with discussions of disability during the COVID-19 pandemic, but he's also a very good friend of mine, and I've known him for almost 20 years now. On the left here, you see a picture of him from when he played wheelchair rugby. And on the right, you see him and his wife, Leah Smith. And in the middle, you see Joe with his new wheelchair, which can actually extend, kind of like an accordion, so it can raise height so that he is able to write on high counter surfaces. Otherwise, he normally can't check in a doctor's office using their surfaces, or use a bank teller area or things like that. So this chair can raise. It also, if you look at the wheels, can turn on a dime. And I can't remember the name of this wheelchair, but he names all of his chairs. When someone uses a chair, they refer to themselves typically as a chair user, not as wheelchair bound, but as a wheelchair user, because the chair is an assistive device that enables them to get around. And so here he is with his two kids that he and Leah have had together. And as you can see, they've got a lot of personality. And he is a Michigan State Spartans fan. So go green, go white. All right. Now, Stromando is better understood if you have a little bit of background. And that's about two models of disability and then a hybrid model that combines them. So the first model is called the social model of disability. This is where people are disabled to the degree that they are because of what society values, because of the built environment, and how people respond to disabled persons. So on this view, the appropriate response to disability is a social response, not a medical one that alters the body of the disabled person. So for instance, people are disabled for getting into buildings because you have to go upstairs to get into the building and there's no ramp. And if there's a ramp, somebody who uses a wheelchair or whose legs are weaker or has balance issues can still get up into the building pretty easily, especially if the ramp is the right, very shallow kind of incline, right? So the appropriate response there is to change the way that people get into buildings, not to try to change the bodies of people who can't climb stairs. The medical model of disability, by contrast, typically argues that people are disabled to the degree that they are really because of the malfunction in their bodies, which drops them below species typical functioning. So the appropriate response here is medical. So here, rather than building a ramp, you would try to repair the bodies of people who could no longer walk upstairs, or you would try to eliminate the existence of people who might be born with conditions that would make it difficult for them to walk upstairs. You might use genetic technologies to test pregnancies or to test embryos before implanting them to make sure that they didn't have any conditions that would make it hard for them to climb stairs, for instance. The hybrid model of disability says that both physiology and social context play a role, right? So on the medical model, you would seek to cure or prevent disability in the body. And on the social model, you would seek to alter society so that a wide range of bodies could still use it. On the hybrid model, you might try to do both, right? So the appropriate responses might be both social and medical. So there might be an extent to which you think that on the hybrid model, all things considered, it's better not to have a body that can't climb stairs. But if you did, you would want to make sure that society had ramps, for instance. So the hybrid model of disability turns out to be quite a popular one. The social model of disability is often preferred by disability advocates and disability rights folks. And the social model, it's important to note, is also compatible with another even deeper notion that's not on these slides, which is that society disables people. So when we talk about disabled people, we mean that society is doing it to them by setting expectations and criteria that are not flexible, that are not adaptable, that don't work for a wide variety of different bodies and minds, for instance, right? Okay, so imagine that you have the body you have and the skills that you have, only you live in an alternate world where most humans can fly. Maybe they use telekinesis, maybe they use wings, it doesn't matter. So imagine that you live in this world. So in this world, the buildings are designed to have balcony entrances to offices and apartments and roof entrances. And people think nothing of being on the 30th floor of an apartment building without any kind of elevator, right? If you were to advertise an apartment that said 30th floor walk up, no elevator, people would be like, what? Are you mad? In our world where everybody walks. But in this world, people would think nothing of it. Right? Restaurants, living spaces are all designed this way. But you, remember, only have the body you actually have and the skills you actually have. So you can't fly up to your apartment. You can't fly to the restaurant. You can't fly to the shop. You can't get into the place you need to be. You are limited to only housing and shops that are at ground level, right? In this world, you would be disabled by what we call the built environment, okay? The social world and the norms and expectations that people have. And so a medical model of disability might say, well, look, we should give you artificial wings, right? Like artificial limbs. Or we should give you a jetpack, which you're not totally against jetpacks. But that would be the kind of medical model approach. The social model would say, maybe we should put in elevators. Maybe we should put in elevators, or at least stairs, right? But elevators, some kind of mechanical means of helping people who can't fly get up and down, right? Maybe even just pulleys, who knows? Oh, wait, an elevator is a giant pulley, cool, right? You can see how, depending on which model you use, the solution is either going to be targeted at the individual or it's going to be targeted at society. So I'd just like you to take these ideas into our discussions of disability in the next few weeks, both this week's readings and next week's readings, and I think a little bit the week after, are going to give us something very different to think about. And it's best if you have in mind the idea that the social model of disability sees the social world as disabling the person because of their differences. The medical model of disability sees the person's body or mind as the disabling factor relative to other species typical bodies. And the hybrid model kind of combines these for a more nuanced approach. All right. In addition, there are two excerpts that I'd like to really